Alright, so I picked me up a second gen a few months ago. If you got one of these and you've ever tried to adjust your air fuel mix once you clean your carbs, do something like that and put them back on, you find out that you can't get to the screws because they're on top on the second gen, right inside of there underneath the tank. What I figured out is I don't like that. And so, since I'm spoiled off my first gens, I decided I'm going to try to make me a little tool that can reach down inside of there and do that adjustment without having to take anything off this bike. So I've been playing around with some designs, and I got me a final design made up. It's going to look something like this. It's got the right angle to get me in there. This is really short, and I'm going to use a flex cable and then modify a bit, and I should be able to reach up in there. So the design's done. Now we just got to start some build, see if we can make some of these things and get this bike adjusted so I don't have to do all this work on what should be just a couple minutes to dial in your air fuel. Taking all this stuff off gets quite annoying. So we'll get set up on it, and we're going to make some of these little guys right here and just see if we can make this a super simple job versus the annoying job that it is right now. Alright, so step one of making this carb adjusting tool is to take just a standard bit, and these are hardened, so what I got to do is heat it up a little bit, take that hardness off, and then I'm going to turn it on the lathe. Because what I want to end up with is this right here that'll fit inside the adjusting tube and connect up to the flexible cable. So we got to do a little turning on that, drill a little hole in it, and then we'll be able to solder this and then crimp it together, and we'll have us a nice permanent connection. So let's get set up over here and cut this little guy down. And there we go. So we got that little guy cut down. He's looking pretty good. Now we've got us a little bit that's going to fit up to the flexible drive shaft, and we'll be set up to go for that. So on to the next step. So step two of making this is to put this bend in here, and I need a perfect little bend, and it can't be compressed because it has to twist inside of there. So made me a little bender along with my big bender. Now I got a little bender on the table. So what I'm going to do is bend this little guy and get that set to the right angle. But in order to keep it from collapsing, what I'm going to do is take a bigger flexi one and I'm going to put it in there, and then when I load this guy up into her, and I just got to set it to the right distance and then clamp it down so it doesn't slide. That's got her locked down. So now all I do is just slip this guy in there and get it past where the rollers are going to hit. So got to be about that deep. So we'll put it in there like that right there. And then all we do is bend him till it gets to the right angle. Right there. So that sets my angle for me. And then, since this guy's flexi, I can pull it back out of there. And I got my bend, and it didn't collapse my tube. So there we go. So now we got us a little bent tube, and the end will fit in there. The corner gets messed up a little bit, so I got to round that back out. And then that guy will fit right in there. So let me go get something to round that out, and we'll be in good shape. And there we go. So now with that end rounded back out, it fits right in there, and it's going to spin around in circles and hold itself in place. So now we just got to do that a few more times for the ones that I'm making here. In case anybody's wanting one of these things, I'll make my one, and then once I'm set up, might as well make a few of them. So we'll have a few available here if anybody likes this idea. Alright, so next stop will be making the inside tube that slides inside of this one. It's made out of stainless as well, so we'll get set up and we'll start cutting those things. Alright, so next on the list we got to make the inside cylinder that's going to get crimped down to the flexible cable, and so that just fits right up inside of our outer, and that's going to be our inside. And there we go. So now we just got to do that a few more times for the rest of them we're making, and we'll be on to the next step. Next on the list is the little flexi cable. So now we just got to take our cable and slip it down inside of here, and what we want to do is measure where to cut, because I got to leave enough. I'll put that guy on there. Get him all the way down in there. I got to leave enough to put my little handle on the end. So let's take our flex cable and put that all the way in there like that. And then now I'm going to measure out and leave myself right at about a 1/2 inch. And now we're done with that step. So now you can see as I crank, it's a tight fit. I haven't crimped it yet, but as I crank it, it's going to rotate around in there. And then what I'm going to do is take the little tubes that I made, and that tube's going to slip down on there and go to right there. So it's going to get crimped onto the flexi shaft. That way it doesn't flex all the way up. It just flexes right at the bend right there. And that'll give me a little more resistance, but I still get some feel for when I take the carburetor down to a soft seat. I'll be able to flex it a little bit, and I'll know that I'm at a soft seat, and then back it back up. So there we go. We just got to do that a few more times for the rest of them, and we'll be on to the next step. Alright, so moving on to the next step, and this is one that just makes life easier on adjusting the carbs, because on the tip up inside where the carburetors are, you can't really see anything. And so what I want to do is drill me some little indents in the tip. And so something like this right here, what I'm going to do is color code them. That way I can see when they move. So a lot easier to figure out how many turns out you are when they got little colors on them. And we can see those. So all we got to do is drill a few holes. And there we go. So now we got some little dents in there, and I'll fill those up with paint. And then we'll have some color coding so we can see as we twist it what we're doing on our turns. Alright, so the last thing to make for our little carb adjuster is the knob that goes on the end. And so we're set up in the lathe. This, the first one that I made, I didn't knurl it, but I'll put a knurl on there to make it kind of pretty. So let's get set up here and make a little knob. And there we go. Now we got our little knob that all I got to do is clean that up once I make a few more. And it fits onto the shaft on the inside, and then we'll drill a hole and put a set screw in there, and we'll have our little knob. So the last little bit of machining we got to do is we got to put that little hole in there and thread it so that we can tighten our knob down on our center shaft. And there we go. So now we are ready to attach that little knob. Alright, now it's time to do some assembly. So first off, what we got to do is take everything back apart where we got started. And so this is our inner little cable. So in order to give it some resistance to wanting to flex, what I'm going to do is put it inside of the inner tube, and then that way only the corner is flexing. And so that gives it a lot more feel in your hand when you're cranking, I've found. Trying to make sure it doesn't flex too much. So we'll start out and we will crimp. And so that's crimped in. Alright. So we look good there. So now this is 3mm, but we want to make it a little bit bigger so that it doesn't wiggle much in there. So this is the outer jacket that was on the 3mm. So this is like 4mm whatever that spool is. So I got to put that back on there. All right, so now we got it ground down. So you can see I exposed the 3mm again, so that way the tip can slip on there. Zoop. And then we got it thicker, so it rounds the bend. And then we can solder the tip on there and then crimp it, and we'll be in good shape. So let's get set up and solder that tip on there. And so we'll just put her right here in the vise, so get a good grip on it. And what I'm going to do is put a little piece of solder down in there, like that. And then we'll fire up the propane torch and cook that, stick that in there. Make sure we get it in there good and deep. There we go. So now it's soldered in there, so theoretically that would be plenty to hold, but we want to go ahead and crimp that. So now let's head over to the crimper and we'll crimp that down with a few tons of crimping force, and then we'll have that thing on there permanently. Alright, so the last step to ensure that that tip is not going to come off there is we want to crimp it. And so I got my crimper dies set up, and so what I want to do is come in here and crimp that area that I just soldered. We'll crimp that down, and we'll move it just a little. And crimp it on down. There we go. So now we are soldered in there and we're crimped as well. So now we can push it back up in there and our tip is on. So all we got left is the handle. We'll just clamp it back up in the vise real easy. And what we want to do is install our little handle. But first we'll put a washer on there to make things slide easier. And then we just want to hold down on that end, make sure it's all as tight as it can be. And then we just tighten our little knob down. And there we go. By only having the spring right here, the rest of that's solid, then there's not any movement at all, hardly, as you turn that knob. So you get a real good feel for adjusting that carburetor. Alright, so we got our little tool done. Everything looks good. I even added a little party light to it so I can see down in that dark hole. So the little party light shines so we can shine down in there, because way down inside of there is where we got to hit this adjustment. So let me zoom down in there and I'll hold it down in there. You can see where we got to go. So right down in there, if I put the little guy in there, you can see the screw right there. So all we want to do is just slide it down inside of there and then get our angle tilted up and find the location where it locks in, and you can see it, and then we just adjust. Alright, so there is the right side one, just fits under there, no more tank removal for me. So let's scoot over to the left side of the bike. Alright, so over to the left side, right inside of there is our little adjustment. So let's get our little party light turned on, and we can reach right up in here on the left side as well. Drop her down in there, and away we go for our adjustment. Alright, so the tool works really good in that 115-degree bend angle, and only being 1 3/4 inches, somewhere around in there. Works just fine for these second gens. I can sneak right in there underneath the tank and over the pods. So we'll make another video that shows me doing the adjustments, because it's going to take a little bit. I'll have to set up and put a manometer on it. First I got to sync the carbs, because if you're adjusting the air fuel but you don't have your carbs synced, it's not going to do any good. The bike won't run any better until the carbs are synced. So first we got to sync them, and we'll set up with a simple tube manometer to show how to sync them, and then I'll adjust the air fuel, and you'll hear this bike sounding so much better at idle and throttling up so much better, and the throttle not sticking and all of that stuff that goes along with these carburetors not being adjusted. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching.